This podcast is brought to you by NEMT Platform.
Oh, wait. Let's unpack this. We are taking a deep dive into an industry that is, I think, for so many people, simultaneously essential and, for those on the inside, often just brutally frustrating. I'm talking about non-emergency medical transportation, or NEMT. And specifically, we're really going to focus on the epicenter of it all, the dispatch operation.
Right. And it's a topic that usually when you hear it discussed, it's with a lot of frustration. You know, we hear about the late pickups, the missed appointments, and just this general feeling that you're perpetually fighting a losing battle.
Yeah, exactly. But today, we're going to try and change the entire angle on this. We're moving beyond just the daily grievances, and we want to look at the system itself.
Which is such a critical shift.
It is. The conventional view, and I think the one accepted by way too many providers, is that chaos in NEMT dispatch is just, it's part of the job.
The cost of doing business, right?
Yeah, exactly. That the late pickups, the constant firefighting, the high stress, that's just the price of admission. And if you're listening to this and you work in this space, you are probably living that reality every single day. But our mission today is really, really important. We're going to reframe this without blame.
And that reframe is so vital because it acknowledges a distinction that, you know, the source material drives home really emphatically. The core thesis here is this. The chaos isn't caused by people being careless. It's not about pointing fingers at a dispatcher for not trying hard enough, or a driver for making a mistake, or even a patient for not being ready on time.
That is the most important distinction we can make right at the top. And it validates the experience of everyone in the workforce. I mean, most dispatchers are spending their entire incredibly high-stress workday just compensating for workflows that are fundamentally broken.
That's a great way to put it. They're compensating.
They're not the problem. They are the highly skilled people trying to bail water out of a leaky boat that the system itself put them in. You know, they're performing daily heroics just to keep the whole operation afloat.
Precisely. The chaos is a symptom. It's not the disease. It's created by systems that were probably designed for a much, much lower operational scale, maybe 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And they just haven't evolved to meet today's volume, today's complexity.
So the real question we have to ask, the one that gets under the surface, is not, why is dispatch so hard?
Right.
It's, why has the industry accepted this predictable systemic level of chaos as if it's unavoidable? Why has it been normalized?
When you frame it like that, as a structural acceptance instead of, individual failing, it changes everything and builds that immediate trust with our listeners because they know this feeling. They know the struggle isn't about their stamina or their effort.
No, it's about the impossible situation that the outdated system puts them in every single day. So we're here to expose a foundational structural problem that has been quietly accepted for years as just the inevitable cost of doing business in NEMT.
And to really dismantle that acceptance of chaos, I think we first need to vividly paint a picture of what this normal chaos actually looks like on the ground. We need to describe the anatomy of a day that, it starts with a perfect plan and then it just rapidly descends into a frantic reaction.
Okay, so let's start with the central communication flaw. I think you've called it the daily juggling act, or maybe the multi-channel madness. It's something our listeners will immediately recognize as the total opposite of a stable workflow.
Yeah. Dispatchers are very rarely working in a single unified digital environment. They're constantly wrestling with these disparate communication channels all at the same time.
So paint that picture. What does the desk physically look like? What's happening?
Okay, so just imagine the physical layout. You've got the dedicated dispatch phone line and it's ringing off the hook. That might be a facility escalating an issue.
Right, high pressure call.
A very high pressure call. And at the exact same moment, a driver is texting the dispatch team lead's personal phone a specific status update.
Or asking for a route change through WhatsApp or something.
Exactly. And then an email dings. It's a broker with a last-minute cancellation that needs to be processed immediately, otherwise you get penalized.
And all this is happening while they're staring at, what, a giant spreadsheet?
A massive, complex spreadsheet that's sitting open on their screen, which is supposed to be the final arbiter of truth.
But everyone knows it's already outdated.
Everyone knows it was outdated 10 minutes after it was made.
It's the sheer cognitive load. I mean, trying to cross-reference all those incompatible inputs manually and instantaneously.
Yeah.
You have to synthesize the information from the phone and the text and the spreadsheet and then make a split-second decision that affects a person's medical care.
Often under a 30-second time limit, while another call is coming in.
And this cognitive overload is just made so much worse by what the source material calls the static schedule problem. This feels like the foundational conflict, right? The beautiful plan versus the ugly reality.
It absolutely is.
So tell us more about that static problem, because this seems to be where the dynamic, ever-changing reality of NEMT just clashes head-on with the plan that was set hours ago.
So the schedule is generated based on anticipated needs, usually overnight or super early in the morning. It's, mathematically optimized for peak efficiency at that one precise moment in time, 6:00 a.m.
It's theoretically perfect.
Theoretically. But then the clock starts, and immediately dynamic friction sets in. Traffic patterns shift because there's an accident. A patient isn't ready when the driver arrives, which throws off that driver's timing for the rest of the day.
Or a crucial piece of medical equipment fails at the facility, delaying a drop-off by 45 minutes that no one could have predicted.
And the fundamental issue here, the one that breaks everything, is that despite all these dynamically changing conditions, the schedule itself is never automatically recalculated throughout the day.
It's fixed. It's rigid.
It's a photograph of a reality that no longer exists.
So if the plan is static, but the environment is fundamentally dynamic,
The plan ceases to be a functional guide almost instantly. It's obsolete by 7:30 a.m. Yet dispatchers are still forced to work off that obsolete blueprint for the next 12 hours.
so they're just constantly using human effort and their own, institutional knowledge to force a square peg, that static plan, into a round hole, which is the dynamic reality of the day.
And that inefficiency, that gap, it
Yeah.
leads directly to delayed awareness. And that then leads to the reactive tracking mechanism that defines the industry.
What do you mean by reactive tracking?
Well, we don't have systems providing live predictive visibility of where the failure is going to occur. Instead, we have drivers communicating their status by calling in late.
So the system's only way of knowing there's a problem is when the failure, the lateness, the missed appointment window has already happened in the real world.
Exactly. Consider the implications of that. Delayed awareness guarantees delayed correction.
You only discover the fire when the alarm is ringing in the customer's ear.
And that lack of proactive tracking, it sets off that horrible communication chain reaction that we all know, which just compounds the chaos exponentially.
Okay, walk us through a specific example. Let's see that failure cascade in action.
All right, let's imagine a critical 9:00 a.m. dialysis pickup. The driver hits unexpected morning traffic that just wasn't in the initial 6 a.m. optimization model. They realize they're going to be about 20 minutes late, but they're focused on driving, right? So they might not call dispatch immediately.
Okay.
So the patient, who is understandably anxious about missing a life-sustaining treatment window, calls the facility at 9:05 a.m. asking, "Where's my ride?"
And now the facility is concerned. They've got their own schedule, their own liability, so they immediately call dispatch. And they're not just asking for an update, they're demanding an escalation, creating really high pressure.
And only then does dispatch frantically call the driver, who was now stressed, probably still stuck in traffic, and now distracted by a phone call.
So that initial 20-minute delay, which a proactive system could have probably managed quietly behind the scenes,
Has now consumed the time and energy of 3 different parties, created measurable anxiety for the patient, and worst of all, it's prevented the dispatcher from addressing 3 other trips that are also probably trending late.
it's just an escalating loop of failure confirmation. The only action taken is reacting to an event that was already guaranteed to cause friction.
That's it. Everyone is focused on reacting to these immediate visible failures: a missing patient, a late driver, an angry facility. Nobody has the visibility, the system-provided insight, to see the full proactive picture and head off the problem before the phones start ringing.
And that state of constant reaction really defines the dispatcher's day. But this brings us to a really important distinction, one that's central to why this is all tolerated, and that's the difference between just being busy and being structurally out of control.
Yes, this is key.
In NEMT, we have to recognize that being busy is expected. I mean, it's high volume, high stakes logistics.
Of course.
You're moving people with medical needs on tight schedules. That's just the nature of the service. You should expect high volume, high pressure, especially at peak times like 8 a.m. and 4 p.m.
Right. Managing that volume and pressure is the job. That's what you sign up for. But where's the tipping point? Where does that expected manageable pressure turn into structural destabilizing failure?
I think if the job is managing volume, the tipping point is when the daily routine becomes firefighting all day, every day, from the moment you clock in until the moment you clock out. That is not expected.
No.
That is a definitive sign that the system design is totally inadequate for the scale of the operation.
I think we need to be really direct with our listeners here. You need to internalize this question. Is your dispatch team managing volume, or are they surviving it? The answer to that question defines whether your system is stable or if it's broken.
That distinction is everything, because surviving means you're relying purely on individual heroics, on institutional memory, on adrenaline, and frankly on human suffering to get the job done. Managing, on the other hand, means you have processes and tools that absorb disruption quietly. They handle the routine chaos without it escalating into a company-wide crisis.
A truly stable system absorbs that disruption quietly and efficiently. It handles the expected volume and the typical curveballs, the accident on the freeway, the last-minute cancellation, the patient who needs 2 extra minutes.
All without the team needing to transform into a permanent, highly stressed crisis management unit.
Right. The volume and the predictable friction should be handled by the sophistication of the technology. That allows the people, the dispatchers, to manage only the true, unique, and unusual exceptions.
But when that perpetual crisis mode becomes the accepted routine, that's where we get into the territory of normalization. This is why we're having this deep dive in the first place.
Correct. And normalization it's insidious. When chaos is a daily, expected, and predictable event, it stops registering in the organizational mind as a failure. It fundamentally shifts in the company culture from being an alarm bell, a warning that something is broken and needs a capital investment, to just feeling like routine.
So if every day starts and ends in a reactive scramble, the very concept of urgency loses its psychological meaning, because the state of emergency is the baseline condition.
Yeah, it's like working next to a continuously buzzing fire alarm.
Yeah.
After the first few hours, you don't jump every time it buzzes anymore. You tune it out. And that tuning out is really dangerous.
That acceptance is the structural lock that keeps the whole industry stuck.
That's right. If chaos is predictable, if you can tell a new hire, hey, just so you know, this driver will call in late at 10 a.m. and that facility will be mad at 2 p.m., then that chaos has already been accepted. It's been accepted by the culture as the necessary, unchangeable cost of doing business. And that prevents any deep look at the structure itself.
It's the highest cost of all, isn't it? The cost of accepting the status quo as some immutable law.
Exactly. So now we can transition from just describing the symptom, the daily chaos, to diagnosing the structural cause. If the daily scramble is the symptom, we have to look deeper. What's the foundational structural flaw that keeps forcing this situation?
And the material's pretty clear on this. It's the persistence of manual dispatch in an industry that has simply completely outpaced it. This is the heart of the limitation.
And we have to frame this calmly and logically. Manual dispatchers aren't inherently inefficient people.
No, not at all.
The methodology itself has just been structurally outgrown by the volume and the complexity of modern NEMT operations. The industry scaled up rapidly, but the tools didn't.
So let's revisit that core flaw. Static schedules and dynamic conditions. You mentioned patient and traffic variables, but let's talk about the sheer complexity a manual dispatcher has to track beyond just time and location.
Oh, the complexity today is immense. A manual dispatcher is trying to manage dozens, sometimes hundreds, of competing constraints in real time using just their memory and quick mental math.
What kind of constraints?
Okay, so simultaneously they're tracking driver credentials, who can handle bariatric patients, who has the right wheelchair training. Then vehicle capacity, the ETA, the facility is very specific, sometimes geopolitical drop-off rules.
The legality of the route, even.
The legality of the route. Patient sensitivity, like patient A absolutely cannot ride with patient B. And on top of all of that, the contractual on-time performance thresholds required by the broker.
That is the cognitive load challenge right there. Human memory and judgment, they just can't scale linearly with trip volume.
They can't.
And as the source material points out, a manual system that worked perfectly fine for 10 trips a day, where the dispatcher knew the drivers and patients by name, it inevitably collapses under the pressure of 100 or 500 trips a day. Yet for so many providers, the fundamental workflows and tools, the spreadsheets, the phones, they've remained exactly the same.
This is the legacy growth problem. Most NEMT companies started small. They grew their volume significantly because the market demanded it, driven by healthcare policy and aging populations.
But they failed to evolve their underlying operational systems.
Exactly. They essentially tried to run a massive, complex logistics operation, like a global supply chain, scaled down using tools designed for a small neighborhood taxi service from 20 years ago.
It's like trying to manage air traffic control for JFK Airport using only walkie-talkies and paper flight strips. It might work for a tiny regional airstrip, but it becomes structurally impossible at scale.
And when you're relying on those phone-based updates or static tracking for your awareness, you are dealing with delayed awareness. This creates an unfixable structural lag.
And that delayed awareness translates directly into delayed correction. The dispatcher is only reacting after the damage is done. A failure has already occurred, a patient is late, a trip is missed, before the system even registers the need for a correction. This guarantees that reactions happen in a scramble, ensuring that perpetual crisis mode because you're always catching up, never getting ahead.
To put a finer point on that cognitive difficulty, just imagine a dispatcher realizes driver 4 is running 30 minutes late for trip A.
Right.
They then have to instantly, manually assess the impact on trip B, trip C, and trip D, which are scheduled to follow A.
So they have to check if another driver 6 is free.
Right. And is driver 6 credentialed for this kind of trip? Is driver 6's current location even logical for a pickup? And then they have to manually re-enter all of this into the spreadsheet or the dispatch board, all while the phone is still ringing.
A system can do that in milliseconds. A human takes minutes. And under stress, they often make a suboptimal choice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because this structural limitation feeds directly into a cultural problem that keeps the system locked in place. And that is the dispatcher hero culture.
This is a critical insight, especially for any leadership listening right now. The industry tends to lavish praise on dispatchers for their survival skills.
Right.
Their ability to handle the pressure, their knack for pulling off a miracle reroute at 3 p.m. that saves a critical appointment.
Yes. They're celebrated maybe with a pizza party or an Employee of the Month title for their stamina, their stress tolerance, and their adrenaline-fueled ability to keep the system from completely imploding on any given Tuesday afternoon.
So the award is for surviving the fire, not for preventing it in the first place.
And that hero culture is so deeply misleading, because heroics, by their very definition, hide systemic failure. If you need a hero every single day just to execute your basic schedule, your system is fundamentally broken. And that management praise, well-intentioned as it may be, acts as a sedative. It numbs the pain of the structural failure.
The trade-off is just so stark. Survival skills replace robust systems. Why would leadership invest, say, $500,000 in 6 months in implementing a sophisticated optimization platform when Sarah in dispatch can just save the day manually time and time again?
Right. Leadership, maybe without realizing it, reinforces the idea that chaos is solved by individual effort and sacrifice, rather than by necessary, expensive, but ultimately stabilizing structural design.
And this feeds into why the problem often becomes invisible to that leadership level. They often only see the aggregated escalations, not the daily friction that leads up to them.
Exactly. The structural chaos, the constant need for manual intervention, it only registers on their radar when the low-level problems compound and bubble up into a significant visible crisis.
Like a major contract being threatened, or a regulatory fine, or an angry facility manager calling the CEO's cell phone directly.
Think about the reporting structure. Without real-time, objective data showing the volume of trips that are trending late, or the specific cost of every reactive reroute, or the number of manual interventions required per hour.
The friction is just assumed to be part of the business.
It lacks quantification,
Yeah.
so it lacks urgency for a major capital improvement. It is really hard to justify a $300,000 system upgrade based on a gut feeling that your dispatch team is stressed.
And let's not forget the external pressure from brokers. They demand high volume and these really stringent compliance metrics, like 98% on-time performance. So that external pressure means the providers have to absorb all the internal operational stress.
They're constantly fighting fires internally just to meet those external demands. And they often believe they just don't have the time or the resource bandwidth to pause and invest in a deep system overhaul.
They prioritize the immediate compliance metric over the long-term operational health of their own company.
And the key insight here is profound. An industry that survives on workarounds will eventually mistake those workarounds for best practice.
If the manual juggling, the spreadsheets, and the high adrenaline heroics have kept the operation afloat for 5 years, management starts to believe that those complex, stressful workarounds are the optimal way to dispatch.
They stop asking what stability looks like, because they've forgotten what calm even feels like.
Okay, so we need to shift the conversation now. We've talked about the daily frustration, the cultural acceptance. Let's talk about measurable, long-term operational loss. This is the crucial intersection where psychology meets finance. Surfacing the costs that do not neatly hit a standard profit and loss statement, which makes them basically invisible to a CFO.
Right. And we have to remind ourselves that if a cost feels invisible, It's usually because it's been distributed. It's spread across people, across strained relationships, and across time, which makes it diffuse and really hard to track on a single ledger line. It's the fog of generalized inefficiency.
So let's start with the hard operational loss that's just masked by the chaos. Reactive decision-making is, by its nature, inefficient. When dispatchers are constantly rerouting trips under extreme pressure, relying on gut feeling, they're choosing the path of immediate survival, the quickest fix to stop the phone from ringing.
Not the path of optimal cost or long-term efficiency.
Exactly.
And that reactive state constantly increases these measurable, yet unaccounted for, operational costs. Think about excessive deadhead miles, wasted driver time sitting idle because a reroute was suboptimal, duplicate trips happening because of a communication failure, or unnecessary overtime paid out because the schedule just spiraled out of control at 4 p.m.
And because the chaos is normalized, these costs are just categorized as fleet operations or general overhead. They're not identified as direct results of a broken scheduling system.
Right. If an automated system could save just 5 minutes of deadhead driving per trip across 200 trips a day, that's a substantial quantifiable saving in fuel and labor. And it's a saving that manual intervention is structurally incapable of achieving, yet that inefficiency is just absorbed as a cost of doing business.
And then there's the cost that's absorbed by the patient. The real-world consequences of a late pickup or a missed trip can severely affect critical treatment schedules. You mentioned a dialysis trip earlier. If that transportation fails, the stakes are immediately life and death.
The cost absorbed by the patient isn't just anxiety either. It's potential health degradation, unnecessary hospitalization costs, and a profound erosion of trust in the entire healthcare ecosystem. These are the human stakes of NEMT. And when the systems fail, the patient pays the price, which then circles back as reputation damage to the provider.
That leads directly to the silent erosion of broker trust. This doesn't happen with a sudden termination notice, does it?
No, it's a slow burn. The friction is constant and subtle. The low-level service failures happen every day, sometimes hundreds of times a week. And the broker's team, they notice the persistent unreliability, the increased need for constant escalation on their side, and just the general feeling that working with this particular provider is high maintenance.
So let's get specific on what that friction looks like from the broker's side.
Well, it's the provider who is barely meeting the on-time performance thresholds, maybe scraping by at 95% when the contract demands 98%. It's the daily need for the broker's own administrative staff to manually reconcile reports because the provider's data exports are messy.
And that inefficiency just compounds week after week, month after month, quietly weakening the foundational relationship long before a major contract review forces a visible loss.
The broker just starts viewing the provider as inherently risky, regardless of what their compliance looks like on paper. They remember the daily headaches, the frantic calls, the need for constant follow-up, and this erosion of trust is a cost that you can't quantify until the RFP for the next cycle goes out and you find out you've lost to a competitor who is promising operational stability.
So now let's talk about Focus 6, the psychological and human toll on the dispatch teams themselves. This requires a serious, non-emotional look at the sustainability of the workforce.
Right. And the human impact is severe, and it translates directly into operational instability.
Yeah.
We're talking about dispatcher burnout and the silent turnover risk that is just inherent in constant crisis management. When the job requires daily heroics just to survive, the cost is exhaustion.
And that exhaustion leads to high turnover rates that most organizations fail to accurately attribute to the systemic flaws. They blame it on the people.
And that constant urgency, it fundamentally reduces decision quality, even for the best, most experienced dispatchers. You cannot sustain peak cognitive performance when your operational baseline is perpetual stress. It's just not humanly possible.
So in that state, you stop thinking strategically about optimizing the entire day, and you start thinking tactically about just surviving the next 5 minutes.
And that stress becomes the operational baseline. Dispatchers start cutting corners, making rapid assumptions based on institutional memory rather than objective data. Or they default to suboptimal solutions just to clear the immediate backlog, which only feeds more chaos into the system later in the day.
And this is the hidden tragedy that just perpetuates the whole cycle. Good, highly capable dispatchers leave the industry. They don't leave because of the raw workload. They expect that volume. They leave because of the underlying instability and the inability to escape that perpetual crisis mode.
You know, there's a better, calmer, more predictable way to operate, and the current system refuses to adopt it, so it just burns them out in the process.
The irony is it's brutal. The best people, the ones who are skilled enough to manage the chaos and who might be able to identify and advocate for system fixes.
They are precisely the ones who burn out and leave, and they take all their institutional knowledge with them.
Which makes the remaining team even more reliant on manual heroics, reinforcing the systemic failure.
It's a vicious cycle.
Okay, so we spent a lot of time detailing why the current state is chaotic. We've established that this chaos is a design flaw, not a personal failing. Now we have to articulate what the alternative looks like. We have to move beyond just defining the problem to describing true operational stability. This is Focus 7.
And this segment is so critical because it gives our listeners a roadmap for what good actually looks and feels like. It's not about buying 1,000 features on a software platform. It's about a fundamental change in the state of mind and the state of operations.
So paint that picture for us. What does good dispatch actually feel like?
The first, most visible sign is just a significant reduction in interruptions in the workflow. Dispatchers are not spending 80% of their day on the phone confirming status, managing complaints, or apologizing for lateness.
So in a stable system, the phone rings when?
It rings only for true exceptions and unique emergencies, not for the predictable daily friction points that should be automated.
And the workflow itself becomes predictable instead of chaotic.
Exactly. You know where the pinch points are going to be hours in advance, and the system either addresses them automatically or it flags them early, long before they become a fire.
And this transition from chaos to calm is really enabled by proactive alerts rather than those reactive phone calls.
The system provides early warnings when a driver's trending late or when a high-priority trip is at risk. This is the exact opposite of forcing late, complaint-driven apologies.
Let's use a concrete example to illustrate the difference. In the chaotic system, the facility calls the dispatcher because the driver is 20 minutes late.
Right. The fire is
In a stable system,
Yeah.
what happens?
In the stable system, the dispatcher receives an automated alert 15 minutes before the driver is mathematically scheduled to be late. And that's based on current traffic and predicted facility wait times.
So that 15-minute window of warning, it allows the dispatcher to intervene calmly and strategically.
Right. They might automatically reroute a nearby, less utilized vehicle proactively. They make the decision under zero stress, prioritizing efficiency and patient care.
Rather than prioritizing the immediate silencing of an angry phone call.
Exactly. And that changes the dispatcher's role entirely. This is where we bring back Focus 8. Systems over heroics. In a stable environment, dispatchers are not micromanaging every single trip. Their new role is managing exceptions and strategic problems.
So they're optimizing flow across the entire region, handling complex, unique patient needs, resolving true emergencies.
Not just putting out daily, predictable fires caused by a static schedule.
This is a fundamental professional shift, isn't it?
It is. The focus moves from brute force survival to strategic oversight. We move from rewarding the individual who survived the day to rewarding the team that designed the day to be stable.
And the ultimate performance metric for a truly advanced NEMT operation becomes calm.
Calm. When calm is a performance metric, you know you're succeeding.
You're actively reducing the need for those sporadic, exhausting heroics. The goal is to design a system where success is routine and unremarkable, not a daily miracle achieved through sheer force of will and adrenaline.
And the management perspective has to change too. Instead of viewing a calm dispatch floor as a sign of underutilization, they view it as evidence that their system investment is yielding dividends.
Dividends in efficiency, lower stress, and higher retention.
Precisely.
So how do modern systems actually break this cycle of chaos and achieve that stability? We've outlined the problem static schedules, delayed awareness. Now let's look at the necessary operational mindset changes.
Well, it all starts with data awareness and accuracy. You have to shift entirely from relying on those unreliable, delayed check-in calls to utilizing true, real-time driver visibility.
And this isn't just seeing a dot on a map. That's table stakes at this point.
No, it's much more than that. It's using accurate GPS data paired with predictive algorithms that understand historical traffic patterns, current road conditions, and even predicted facility wait times to understand exactly when a driver will arrive.
So that real-time awareness replaces the unreliable, delayed phone-based status updates. It gives the dispatcher instantaneous and objective truth about reality. And it allows them to intervene based on data, not a panicked driver's guesstimate.
The second massive shift is from fixed plans to continuous recalculation. Instead of that beautiful but obsolete static schedule created once in the morning, the system has to be continuously recalculating and reoptimizing the entire schedule throughout the day.
That's like Google Maps, right? It doesn't just give you one route at the start of your trip. It's updating that route every 2 minutes based on live data.
That's the perfect analogy. And that dynamic adjustment is the key to mitigating delays before they can compound. If a driver is delayed by 10 minutes on trip A, the system immediately assesses the ripple effect on trips B, C, and D. And then it generates a new, optimized schedule that mitigates those 3 subsequent delays, perhaps by swapping drivers or moving a lower priority trip.
And this eliminates the need for the human dispatcher to constantly try to redesign the entire day on the fly under immense pressure.
The machine handles the complex, multivariable calculus, which frees up the human to apply judgment where it truly matters, with patient interactions or unforeseen mechanical failures.
And finally, that shift from reaction to prediction.
Right? Instead of waiting for the complaint, the failure, the system is designed to trigger proactive alerts based on thresholds you set. For example, if a key performance indicator, like the on-time performance for a specific broker, drops below 96%, the system flags it immediately.
Which allows for a strategic course correction over the next hour, not a panicked justification at the end of the month when you're trying to explain why you missed your numbers.
It's observing that modern NEMT platforms, systems, that incorporate this real-time optimization and predictive analytics, they are built specifically to remove chaos by design. They don't rely on better human discipline or higher human endurance. They're engineered to make chaos structurally impossible at scale.
And if we look deeper at that cultural aspect from Focus 8, why does leadership often prefer heroics? It seems so counterproductive.
Well, it's a fundamental misunderstanding of cost. Investing in systems is a visible, large capital expenditure. It shows up on a budget line.
Right.
Rewarding a hero is a small consumable cost, a plaque and a pizza party. It feels cheaper.
And furthermore, I think relying on a heroic individual reinforces a perceived individual power structure that can be comfortable for some managers. It allows them to feel in control of the solution, even when the system is failing around them.
The real strategic shift is recognizing that a calmer workforce, supported by robust systems, is inherently more efficient and less costly over the long term than a workforce that's constantly replacing burnt-out heroes. When the system is stable, the value of the dispatcher moves from frantic problem solver to strategic workflow manager, which is a much higher value, sustainable position for everyone.
So what does this all mean? We started this by saying we weren't here to blame dispatchers or drivers for the chaos. We were here to understand why chaos is so normalized within NEMT operations.
And the core insight we've landed on is pretty clear. Chaos in NEMT dispatch is not an immutable personality trait of the industry. It is a critical and for too long tolerated design flaw. It persists because of legacy growth models, because of a misleading hero culture that rewards survival over stability, and because of a profound lack of objective data visibility at the leadership level.
The moment the industry stops accepting chaos as normal, the moment they stop rewarding the person who heroically survives the fire and start rewarding the person who structurally prevents the fire, that is the moment that patient care, dispatcher well-being, and operational stability finally align. Those 3 pillars are intrinsically linked. You can't optimize them separately.
And true stability doesn't just mean better financials and a lower cost per trip. It means profoundly better care outcomes, higher reliability for vulnerable patients, and a more humane, sustainable working environment for the people on the front lines. It turns a job defined by constant anxiety into a job defined by strategic, measured management.
We want to leave you with a final, gentle industry challenge, something for you to chew on as you reflect on your own operations and the systems that you rely on.
Yeah, we invite you to reflect deeply on this. What specific chaos have you accepted as normal within your organization? What predictable daily emergency no longer feels like an emergency because it happens so often that you've just tuned it out?
And which problems repeat daily, requiring the exact same manual intervention or the same specific dispatcher's institutional expertise? You know, the one person who knows that obscure routing constraint without ever reaching a true systemic resolution.
And finally, I think this is the ultimate litmus test for systemic health. If a brand new dispatcher joined your team tomorrow, equipped only with your standard operating procedures and the current software, would the underlying system actually support them in doing their job effectively?
Or would they immediately be required to rely on heroics, on adrenaline, and pure survival skills, learned through a high-stress baptism by fire just to make it to lunch?
Look deeper than the surface noise. Challenge the systems that mandate constant struggle.